G'day and welcome to Reality Check. Before we start this week's show, a quick word about this week's sponsor. Dr. Amy Lee, she's a US board-certified physician and expert nutritionist, sharing her warning about 3 harmful foods she'd like you to be aware of. She says these foods cause weight gain, they clog your digestive tract, they deplete your energy, and they wreck your skin. In fact, they're banned in other countries, but not in America. She's got a new video art which you can watch at 3harmfulfoods.com/Ross. That's numeral 3 harmfulfoods.com/Ross. Dr. Lee details how to spot and avoid these foods so you can experience easier weight loss, smooth digestion, and vibrant energy. We're linking to the video below, but once again, that link is 3harmfulfoods.com/Ross. Now let's get on with this week's show. Welcome back to Reality Check. Once again, I'm in Egypt. And boy, it's been an amazing experience. It's full of mysteries, this place. The biggest mystery is the advanced technology that lies behind the magnificent structures like the Great Pyramid of Giza. 138 meters of limestone blocks. How did a civilization that didn't actually have the wheel, only had copper tools if they were lucky, build such a gigantic object?
It's only when you walk around the Great Pyramid of Giza and look up its steep sides and you realise what a feat of workmanship it was for whatever era it was that it was built in. If you accept that it was built, say, 5,500 years ago, at the very beginnings of the dynastic Egyptian pharaohic civilization, it was an incredible accomplishment. Because not only is it level to perfection, the sides straight to perfection, it's just a mammoth engineering task. And I struggle to see how we could replicate it today. I mean, it is massive. It's awe-inspiring. And like most of Egypt, there's a mystery behind its construction. We just can't explain the technologies that were used to build it. It suggests very strongly that there was perhaps a prior advanced civilization that we don't know about.
So have a look at this lump of basalt sitting here in front of the Great Pyramid of Giza. It's perfectly cut, absolutely perfectly cut at a 90-degree angle. And it looks like something's gone right through this gigantic lump of basalt, and I can't explain how we would cut that today without a very strong diamond-tipped saw. So how did either dynastic Egyptian civilization, which I think is unlikely, or a far earlier ancient civilization cut a block of basalt like this? Got any answers for me, JP?
Pull them out my hat.
So, well, meet JP Haig, my good friend, a lawyer from Mauritius, who also happens to have an interest in the esoteric. Where are we, JP?
Well, Roscoe, it doesn't take a million guesses to find out that we are outside Menkaure Pyramid, the smallest of the 3 pyramids on the Giza Plateau. It's the only pyramid of the 3 that I've not actually entered, like yourself. And I'm excited to see what's inside.
So I'm told that that gouge in the side of Menkaure is because of the son of Saladin in 1200 and something. They tried dismantling the pyramid on Dad's instructions, and apparently it took them ages and ages, and they weren't able to achieve it. And a lot of the stones that they dismantled it from are still sort of scattered at the bottom of the pyramid. And it really does beg the question, if they had so much difficulty disassembling the pyramid, how in God's name did they build it 5,000 plus years ago?
It's a good question.
Do you know, it's funny, JP, I have a really strong sense that what we're doing right now is exactly what people were doing 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 1,000 years ago. This has been a perennial thing, coming to these pyramids, and yet it's a huge mystery.
Yeah.
How the hell did they build these things?
But they're just, I mean, the term iconic comes to mind, and There's something archetypal about them. There is a sacred geometry to the shape of the pyramid. It represents the divine, the creator.
Come around later? Huh? Maybe later, sir?
Later, thank you. And even the camels and their riders are God's creation, like us.
I love it.
Yeah.
What's that middle pyramid there called?
This is Khafren Pyramid. Obviously meant to be named after the king that's associated with it as a tomb, but much like the Great Pyramid and indeed this one, I don't think these were tombs at all. I think they are multiple layers of merging of science, technology, spirituality, aestheticism. Absolutely incredible. And they're tapping a divine geometry that we have lost or forgotten about in our current times. And I personally think that they were initiatic centers for priest initiates to access the unseen. And what I mean by that is extrasensory type information that requires a degree of cultivation and inherent ability. Very difficult to prove, but I often think about the story of Napoleon inside the Great Pyramid. Apparently there's a sort of a myth or folklore that he was initiated into the Freemasons inside the Great Pyramid of Khufu, which is just behind us, and allegedly initiated by the Count of Saint-Germain, who's an interesting character associated with the ideas of philosophical death, the idea of immortality within the human form, the human body. And apparently he spent the night inside the pyramid and received the vision of his Waterloo to come. And lo and behold, he came out the next day and apparently was as pale, as white as the driven snow.
Love it. So, let's get in there, JP.
Let's do it, Ross.
Morning.
I have the ticket.
So you don't think this was a sarcophagus at all?
No, I think they were initiatic type centers, devices, designed to act on human consciousness, connecting with something greater than the self.
Oh God, this is where I regret being so poor.
Yep. Take my glasses off. Oh, this isn't too bad compared to some of them. Now, when we enter the Great Pyramid at night, we're going to have full access to the entire pyramid, which means the subterranean chamber.
Yep.
And that is pretty difficult to get down into. You have to crawl down on your belly to get in there.
So really there's no evidence at all that these were sarcophagi?
No, they just happen to be granite boxes that are there, and the assumption made that they were tombs for kings. Which of course doesn't exclude the fact that bodies could have been put there after the pyramids were built, thousands of years before.
So you think there's a more plausible explanation that these are somehow some kind of, an amplifier, a communications device?
Yeah, I think there were initiatic centers, highly complex, that were built for an initiatic and as well as a functional purpose, and it deals with this idea of the invisible coming into contact with the material world.
And do you really think they're just 5,500 years old?
My speculation is they're far older, Ross.
So, JP, the thing I find most perplexing is looking around at these walls. I mean, supposedly this was built 5,000 plus years ago. how the hell did they do this with what they had at the time, which was stone and copper adzes?
I just don't think it's a plausible explanation, and you know, particularly in the timescales that the pyramids were supposedly built in. How do they maneuver all the granite and limestone all the way here?
I mean,
How did they perfectly fit?
I mean, they're perfectly square walls, you know. How do you do this with a bronze adze?
Yeah. These were master masons in the fullest sense. And I think the techniques and the organization around it has to have been so much more complex than we can imagine. I don't buy all the kind of maneuvering through, wooden logs and, sort of mass production through chain manufacturing and so on.
The thing I find amazing about this, JP, is it's a mystery in plain sight. I mean, you look at these buildings, constructions, whatever you call them.
Edifices.
And I don't think we could build this today.
With difficulty, not in this manner.
So how did they build it 4, 5, 6,000 plus years ago?
Probably with techniques and knowledge that we are just out of touch with right now. And in isolation, it's highly questionable and debatable. But when you look at Egypt as a whole and some of the sites and the perfection of the cutting, the smooth boring of granite and laser-like sheet cutting of the granite as well, you have to ask yourself, at what point in time did this come in? And what were the construction and Masonic techniques used? Because there is a disconnect between the official Egyptological narrative and the reality on the ground that those with eyes that see.
A mystery in plain sight.
Exactly.
Here we are, the ancient Sphinx.
Hello, darling.
Put your head in there. If there's a resonance, you hear a resonance that goes like.
Okay, in I go. Oh yeah. It's like a throbbing V8 engine. I hope that comes through on the microphone. How extraordinary. You hear a resonance, a throbbing, like an engine deep inside the building. What an extraordinary thing. So here we are at the Meagan Pyramid, about 2 hours out of Cairo, and it's massive, absolutely huge. Get a load of this, absolutely gigantic. It's a weird shape. And unfortunately, there's a lot of stairs. Okay, here we go. My next pyramid. It's a long way down. Actually, it's not too bad. It's not as low as the last one I climbed in. And there's a very helpful handrail. Well polished by lots of frightened tourists. Oh my goodness me. So here we are, deep underneath the Meagan Pyramid. It's all very Raiders of the Lost Ark. You wouldn't want to have a fear of confined spaces coming in here. It's pretty tight. Ah, so this is the burial tomb. It's a bit of an anticlimax, to be perfectly honest.
Because it's not.
I mean, you'd be pretty upset if you were a grave robber and you come all the way down here and there's nothing in here. So imagine you're an enterprising grave robber, it's 1000 AD, you chip your way through tons of limestone looking for the treasure of the emperor's burial chamber, and you find this. I mean, really. You know, one of the hassles of climbing pyramids is you've got to get out of them again. Have a look at this. Oh my goodness.
JP, what was that about UFOs in this pyramid?
Well, apparently there were sightings of UFOs appearing over the pyramid and around the area between the years of 1986 and 2016, which is a 30-year period, pretty long.
What's this pyramid called?
This is called the Lahun Pyramid.
Lahun.
Apologies, yeah.
Lahun.
Lahun.
And it's mud bricks over limestone rocks. Why would UFOs be attracted to this area in particular?
Oh, pre-dynastic happenings, I would suspect. Maybe we don't understand what the use of this site was or who was here. But
maybe you're drawn to the energy or something.
That's what I was going to say, because actually I can feel it right now.
Oh, you can?
Yeah, it's a very positive, uplifting energy, and I think it was kind of fitting that we saw 2 buses full of beautiful school children that were happy to see us outside.
They were gorgeous. They were lovely kids.
Beautiful. The innocence of the child. Just love it.
So we're here at Abydos, which is the Temple of Osiris. And I'm told here is some of the most spectacular art that really does raise intriguing questions about just exactly what was going on in our prehistory here in ancient Egypt. Let's go and have a look.
Okay, let's put this debate away. Why Osiris? Why not Ra? Why not Amun? Why not? Because Osiris is the one who was killed, died, and came back to life. So Osiris here means what? Resurrection. So the ancient Egyptians, the dynastics, when they found that the power of this place are similar or a reason for resurrection, so they give it this title, Osiris Temple.
Currently crawling down a very narrow staircase into what's called the main crypt of the Dendera Temple, where there is the Dendera light bulb, and you have to squeeze down into a very narrow space, which I'll just show you. It's quite extraordinary.
Ross, you'll be rescuing me.
Here we go. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness me. It's about 2 feet high, that little hole. Either they were tiny little fellas, those Egyptians, or they had a sense of humour. So here we are, we're still going down this path. Oh, look at this, the luxury of it. We've got a capacity to stand up. So it's funny actually, you'd think it would be really cold down here with the stone, but it's actually incredibly hot. Super warm.
We've got 4 pillars with Hathor as the cow.
And
So we're looking at light, frequency, and sound resonance.
Look at that. That looks like electricity being represented.
It does. It looks like energy, and we've got light and sound represented, and the sound is supported by a pillar, but underneath, supporting the sound is light.
Sound, light, and frequency.
And look, we have the physicality, the temple or temples being raised by these strands or cords of energy that are emanating from another source or pillar of some kind.
So, do you think that's a literal representation of a technology, or do you think I'm being too literal?
No, I mean, if we look at the depictions that were in the second hall when we arrived, we see a physical movement of the temple being physically levitated off the floor, because we can see it being lifted off the floor. It's not touching the floor, which is very, very clearly kind of delineated. And here we've got some interaction between the spectrum of light, sound. Hathor obviously represents frequency and resonance, and then waves of energy, which you see in the celestial zodiac in Aquarius.
That one really gets me.
Yeah.
I mean, if ever you were going to represent electricity contained within a vessel, that's it.
That's it.
Actually, you can see a light, and you can see a cable going into it, can't you?
It looks like technology is all I'd say.
It does, doesn't it? I mean, it's hard to escape the idea that that's something electrical, but maybe we're, what's it called? Pareidolia. Maybe we're putting our human impressions onto objects, onto symbology.
Absolutely.
Or maybe it's technology.
Maybe nothing.
So this is in the temple of Dendera, and these are what look like light bulbs. It's amazing to be here in the Valley of the Kings, which is where many of the pharaohs were buried in secret, with a huge number of the incredible treasures, the things that Howard Carter described when he found the tomb of Tutankhamun as wonderful things. But there's a mystery, there's a conundrum behind that whole story. Who on earth made these incredible technologies, these fine stone vases, the beautiful carved statuary, the incredibly well-honed granite blocks that are accurate, sometimes within micromillimeters? How do we explain those technologies with what we understand were the tools of that era? The pre-dynastic Egyptian civilizations, if they were lucky at all, had copper chisels. More likely, they had flints and stone adzes. Then how do we explain the beautiful objects, the wonderful things that Howard Carter described when he opened the tomb of Tutankhamun? So we're going down into the tomb of Ramses III, deep underground in the Valley of the Kings. And not surprisingly, because it's a nice cool time of year here in Egypt, it's like Grand Central Station at rush hour. But it's still pretty special coming down here and knowing that what we're standing in is a building that was built at least thousands of years ago. And there's a real question mark about this whole claim about this civilization that existed here. Was it actually the tombs of the pharaohs that it was built for? Or was it perhaps built for another purpose and then reused by the pharaohs later on? That's the theory we're exploring. I can only imagine what it must have been like for the early explorers to rediscover these tombs and realise that what they'd stumbled across was the tomb of an ancient king. But the real question mark is, was this originally conceived as the tomb of an ancient king? Or did it perhaps have an even earlier purpose? I have to admit, it does tend to destroy the beauty of experiencing these tombs, or whatever they are, to share them with thousands and thousands of other people. But you do get an incredibly profound sense of just how old these places are. I mean, if you think about what they estimate, it's at least 4,000 or 5,000 years old. And if you listen to the experts we're talking to on this tour, it's possibly tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of years old. It's a mystery in plain sight.
There's a blue deity for you.
A blue deity?
Yes.
And there's one of my blue guy friends.
Huh?
Hey, blue guys. Tell me your secret. Here I am heading down into the tomb of another ancient king, perhaps on my own journey into the afterlife. Deep, deep, deep under the Valley of the Kings. It's absolutely massive, this place. You should see it. Incredible to think that these drawings, these paintings are thousands of years old. And so here's an ancient sarcophagus carved out of what looks like solid granite. Now, are you telling me they made that with copper chisels? I'm sorry, I strongly doubt it. I have a really strong sense in this place that all the carvings, the hieroglyphics, and indeed perhaps even the sarcophagus came a lot later. This really feels like a room that it was built for another purpose. So the conventional view in modern Egyptology
is that all of these pharaohic tombs in the Valley of the Kings were actually built by the dynastic Egyptians during the period of the pharaohs. But there's a growing possibility, speculation, and it's really only speculation at this stage, that these tombs aren't really tombs at all, that they might in fact have been here before the dynastic Egyptians arrived on the scene, and maybe they used these existing cave tunnel structures for their own purposes, to bury their pharaohs. And it begs the question, who built these tunnels? Who had the capacity to hew great lumps of granite and cut it to often micromillimeter accuracy? Is the alleged sarcophagus deep inside the tomb I've just visited, is it really a burial sarcophagus, or is it something else? That's the question. Are we misunderstanding a lot of what we take for granted as accepted truths about modern Egypt? I think this one's called Sathap. Forgive me for the mispronunciation, which I'm sure I've done. But the interesting thing about this is that it's uncompleted. Looks less and less like a pharaohic burial chamber. Was this really a burial chamber for a pharaoh originally? Or was it designed for some other purpose? Certainly it's uncompleted. I'm not so sure, and neither are the experts we're talking to. They think these caverns may have been here before and were adapted for purpose by the pharaohs. And maybe, just maybe, these supposedly sarcophagi aren't sarcophagi at all. So riddle me this, explain this to me. Have a look at the hieroglyphic scratchings on the end of what they say is a burial sarcophagus. And if you have a look, I'm just going to turn my camera around. You see these almost like chicken scratchings into the end of the granite sarcophagus. And whoever it was that did these etchings clearly only had the copper chisels of the time in dynastic Egypt. And they were struggling to etch into the granite. So whoever it was that crafted this entire sarcophagus, if that's what it was, had the ability to cut granite in ways that even the experts admit they can't explain for what the tools were in modern dynastic Egypt. It's the best sort of mystery, a riddle in plain sight. There's no getting over it. These gigantic dolomite granite statues are completely beyond comprehension. There is no way humans built these. Simple as that. Even the official Egypt archaeological explanation can't provide an answer for how humans of the era built these statues in the pre-dynastic civilization. So that's at least 12,000 years ago. It's a mystery sitting here in the obvious plain, and nobody can explain it. And thousands of tourists walk past every day and don't ask that question. If it wasn't the known human civilization that did it, who did do it? You think a machine? You think some kind of machine built that?
Some kind of machines and some kind of like an operating system for the machine. Okay, because that's the operating system guiding the machine to do that perfection. Okay, this operating system is made by humans or made by AI. I don't think it's only humans because. Humans will not make such perfection.
And what's the minimum age that statue would be?
Well, I will tell you when we go inside, but most of the statues we're having here are more pre-Diluvians. The word pre-Diluvian could mean a lot for us, but we can give an age to most of the monuments from the pre-Diluvian times. Mostly they are over 12,000 years old. Okay, but how old exactly? I think it was most of these were being made during the time of Shemsu Horus. most of the statues, especially the statues, they were made during the time of Shimisuho, and Shimisuho is about 20,000 to 12,000 years back. Okay, why they made statues? To remember the first humans who brought the civilization to Earth. Okay, these statues are not for Ramses II or Amenhotep II, III, or any of the dynastic kings. There are some statues, yes, from the dynastic times, but not the red granite or the granodiorite. Like these statues are over 200 tons, okay, 200 to 300 tons. This one is up to 200 tons. Of course, we can't understand that humans with primitive techniques, and also even by our ways of thinking with our advanced techniques now, we can't understand how humans could able to do this.
So when scientists did a laser scan of this amazing granite dolomite statue, one of the hardest stones in the world, they were absolutely astonished because the head is absolutely symmetrical. If you put a line down the middle of the head and go to the eyes, go to the ears, everything perfectly matches. I think we'd be hard-pressed to replicate that today. And yet, from what the tour is telling me, this statue is probably over 10,000 years old, minimum. It's suggestive of an unknown, possibly human civilization that existed here, that explains the technology. I mean, who had the tools to be able to carve dolomite, granite? All round this ancient temple of Karnak, there are the most amazing blocks of granite, basalt, alabaster, and they've been cut to tolerances that I suspect we'd struggle to replicate today. This needle is hundreds of tons, and it's cut out of one piece of solid granite. I mean, it's breathtaking. I look around and the mystery is in plain sight. There's a conundrum. How do we explain how these objects were built? This is the Temple of Karnak.
And this was given as a title to Men Khibra, the stable form of the sun. This was the name of a king called Thutmose III. So what does it mean here? In my opinion, the secret keeper of the technology of the stargates. So he, the one, could activate the stargate. Originally, this was one piece. The whole room was made from one block. Okay? If you look carefully, you can see this wall was connected with the ceiling. Can you see the connection? But it was destroyed. Okay? Here, the ceiling was connected to here, and this was connected to the door jambs. Also, the other side. Okay? So I know for sure, and from another example, we're going to see it later, that this was one giant block of alabaster. Okay? When we talk about cutting limestone, and we think it is easy, and alabaster is easy, and we talk about cutting granite, okay, which is hard, actually we can also flip the meaning. How? To cut granite, it is super hard, because it is very hard material, so you need very high machine, very high technology, okay? But I can tell you, if we use what we call it a tool with so much vibration, granite can stand against this vibration, okay? So if you have a mechanical drill and you are drilling on granite, the piece will not shatter easily, even with this force. But if you do this on limestone or alabaster, one little vibration can break it like glass. So here is the problem. It is not super hard to cut, but it is super sensitive. And you can see these lines. Can you see these lines? These are deposits above each other. Here, look what happened. So if I have now any pressure, I put any pressure here, it will separate this line. So all the stories about using primitive techniques, even it doesn't fit. Why? Because they are under the ground. So they must have machines. And when you cut this piece from under the ground, okay, then you try to find a way to take it out.
Without breaking
okay?
it.
Without breaking it, of course, okay? And then from that level, the story in Egyptology will start about how to take it outside the quarry. So they keep talking about how they cut this in deep level and then take it outside this groove or this cave.
Here we are in Edfu Temple. It's quite special. It's also crowded. Beautiful sandstone walls covered with incredible hieroglyphics, including hieroglyphics of what looks like a temple being levitated. All around Egypt there are intriguing little hints that the Egyptians in ancient times had abilities, perhaps, that we don't have today. One of the things that is suggested from the hieroglyphs is the possibility that they developed the art of levitation. Have a look at this. What you see there is a cord apparently lifting a temple off the ground. And some of the scientists believe that what this is an example of some kind of levitation ability. I'm reserving judgment, but whatever it is, it's pretty intriguing.
There was a connection between this lady and the stars, especially her outfit in some places is decorated with a lot of scenes, looks like stars, and sometimes I believe they look like the flower of life, okay? And after they fix the boundaries of the temple, here they are fixing exactly where the temple will be built. So it was not being done by the king only. There is someone celestial has to choose the location of the temple. If you remember, Muhammad was telling you that temples are out of many elements, okay? The alignment and also the location are the most important elements in building temples. After that, the man is pouring water, but I don't think it's water on the ground of the temple, because the water is mostly represented like waves, like this one, okay? But this one is not like water, okay? This one seems like the dots we have seen surrounding the temple outside. And we have also here kind of what we studied. These are the foundation offerings, not the foundation offerings. These are devices to help for the levitation process. Okay? Yeah, because we are controlling gravity by these kind of devices. Okay? It's not something like the energy wave you're surrounding the temple. There should be an opposite energy underneath the temple, so they make that kind of levitation. So they start with these. This is adding kind of like chemicals or something like that, which is giving the energy or catalyze the energy of these things here on the ground. And after that, surrounding the temple with the field of energies like the one we have seen outside, and that causes what causes this.
Ah, that's the levitation.
That's the levitation. Wi-Fi and a muffin. Okay? Of course, that's ridiculous. Okay? Just similar to the lamp of Dendera. Okay? Unfortunately, some people are being fooled with these interpretations. They are not having like a kind of logic evidence for that. Okay, what I think we are having here, that's a kind of basket. What we have studied, that's reps of meat. Okay, reps of an animal, so it refers to meat, but I don't think so, because there's some spaces between these lines. Okay, so what is that exactly? I think it was a basket.
So here at the temple of Kom Ombo, there are more mysteries in plain sight. I mean, quite apart from the fact that this is exquisitely carved rock, there's just the simple practicality. How did a civilization that was essentially not long out of flint adzes and stone adzes, capable of lifting gigantic stone beams like this one. I mean, it's breathtaking. They're absolutely monstrous. They must be 20 to 50 tons. And there's dozens of them all over this building. I've got to hand it to Egypt. It's pretty bloody spectacular. So here's one of the biggest mysteries of all, what's called the unfinished obelisk in Aswan in southern Egypt. It's the quarry where all the red granite that was found further north came from. We don't know how they got that granite up the Nile River, and we sure as hell don't know how they moved objects as large as this one. Have a look at this. This is the unfinished obelisk. It's absolutely massive, carved out of one lump of granite. It's absolutely gigantic. It still sits embedded in the granite bedrock, and it's enormous. The cuts are almost 90 degrees accurate, and when you look very closely, like look here, you can see what look like scoop marks in the granite. Now, nobody can really explain where those scoop marks came from. They're sure as hell not explained by men with stone adzes. It's a mystery that nobody has ever been able to solve. So here's a mystery. Have a look at this part of the obelisk. You can see they've tried, probably in dynastic times, to cut a smaller lump of granite out of this big unfinished obelisk. And they failed. They couldn't do it. So a later civilization came to this obelisk and tried to cut a slab out of it and failed, which all begs the question, who was it who cut this gigantic obelisk? Who cut this gigantic obelisk before dynastic Egypt? JP, I see a gigantic lump of granite, an almost incomprehensibly large lump of granite. It must be hundreds and hundreds of tons.
Yep, it's a mystery that something so large can be shaped, sculpted, and effectively excavated from this rose granite, which is harder than steel. And you know, the only evidence that we're being given is that hard rocks were used over hundreds of years.
I think that's hilarious.
It is funny.
Using hard rocks to chip away something as accurate as this unfinished obelisk.
Yeah, I think this is beyond 2001 A Space Odyssey. I think advanced tooling was used. My speculation would be sonic tools that could effectively resonate the granite at such a high frequency that it would probably been disintegrated into dust and it being lead, which could explain why you see these kind of ice cream scoop marks, which are so smooth and perfect.
I guess the other question is, how on earth would they have lifted something as large as this out of this quarry and transported it up the river to wherever they wanted to move it?
Exactly, and when you think about it, the depictions in Edfu Temple on the Nile, in Kom Ombo, and indeed even in Dendera Temple, the Temple of Hathor, where we see this these beings, these kings, effectively using some kind of energy lines that lift or raise the temple. In one image, you can see the temple is affixed to the ground. In the next image, you see a field around the temple, and it's depicted as being lifted from the ground.
So you think they had levitation?
It would make sense. The only question is how.
So get a load of this absolutely massive lump of red granite, one of the hardest stones in the world. Now, this is probably pre-dynastic Egypt. Our tour guide is suggesting that it's possibly older than 12,800 years old. Now, that civilization, according to archaeologists, didn't have even metal tools. That's pre-copper tools.
But look how accurately this incredible unfinished obelisk is being cut. Almost 90-degree cuts. And the weird thing about it is these strange scoop marks in the granite. I mean, seriously, I don't know anything about rocks or cutting rocks, but the idea that they used a stone like this to cut this is utterly absurd. So the suggestion from Egyptology is that is what they did to smooth and cut the rock.
Yes, which is frankly a caveman-like explanation that draws images from 2001 Space Odyssey in the opening scenes.
300,000 years later.
Yeah, still going strong. Believe in the process.
I'm done now.
Trust me.
So here's another mystery. We're on Elephantine Island. And Elephantine Island is the site of the most extraordinary lumps of solid diorite granite, one of the hardest stones in the world. And these objects are supposedly pre-Diluvian, which means they're older than 12,800 years old, before known human civilization. And yet, have a look at them. Look at the accuracy of the cutting. I don't think a culture that had stone adzes and flint adzes could possibly have created these. This is what they look like. Absolutely extraordinary. Absolutely perfect right angles cut into one of the strongest stones in the world. And it's like this whole area, it's as if a whole bomb has gone off. These things have been thrown aside in what looks like some kind of massive explosion. And this is the pièce de résistance, a near intact box that is exquisitely cut out of diorite. Actually, no, that's red granite. Still an extremely hard rock. And this was supposedly made 12,800 years ago in the pre-dynastic civilization. Nobody can explain how something like this box was carved out of solid red granite. It's just a mystery. And what caused it to be thrown aside like this? Look inside there and see those perfect 90-degree lines. That is an exquisitely cut stone box that would be a challenge to do even today, let alone 12,800 years ago.
You see the circular cut there as well.
Absolutely, yeah, there's obviously a cut for doors. That is extraordinary. And there's not, the other thing, JP, I notice is there's no striations in the granite. It doesn't look like somebody's used a saw.
No.
You only have to come here to the Egyptian Museum to realise there is a mystery in plain sight in ancient Egypt. How were exquisite objects like these gigantic stone statues carved out of dolomite, how were they fashioned? Here's another beautiful example of the dilemma, the mysterious dilemma in the Cairo Museum. Among fairly simply crafted pottery vases, there are these absolutely exquisite stone vases, and they are absolutely magnificent. Carved out of solid granite, they defy explanation. Have a look. These are absolutely beautiful objects that, on analysis, Ben van Kerkwijk told us the other week, on analysis they show perfect symmetrical form. And they can't have been turned on a wheel because those lugs would have blocked any lathe. How do you explain perfection in such an object that is literally thousands, if not tens of thousands of years old? And there are vases like this all over the museum here, indeed all over Egypt, and they're next to fairly ordinary pottery that frankly doesn't pass muster in comparison. Clearly there was some kind of an advanced civilization that was capable of building these beautiful objects, and they sit here in this museum very much
unexplained. All over this incredible museum, there are objects that just defy explanation. None better than this small little box in a corner of the museum showing stone pottery pots, or stone pots, that simply are inexplicable. That object up there is something carved out of granite. Stone vessels. They're stone vases, or vases as you say in America. And a lot of the elite of Egypt were buried with these vases, as Ben van Kerkwijk told us the other week. But the big issue is, did they really make them? Because the analysis that's been done by Ben and Chris Dunn, the noted engineer, suggests that these vases are accurate to a point of absurdity within thousandths of a millimetre. And they also follow precise divine mathematical ratios. How did a pre-dynastic civilization, or even an Egyptian dynastic civilization, create something as exquisite as this? That's solid stone. Here in the Cairo Museum, the schist disc is one of the most extraordinary objects in the collection. Carved out of a really hard stone called schist, it looks like some kind of industrial fan. There's really no explanation for how an ancient civilization could have carved this object. It's extraordinary. Have a look. It's the weirdest looking object. The best that they've been able to offer on the explanation on the side of the box here is it's a vessel from a high official's tomb. This unusually shaped object comes from the tomb of Sabu, a high official serving the first dynasty kings Den and Ajib. They suggest it might have been used for royal or religious ceremonies, either as part of an offering tray or as support for a vessel or a basket. So it was found in the tomb of Sabu. The big question is, was it really crafted in the reign of Sabu? The best theories have it that this is actually pre-dynastic, tens of thousands of years old, crafted by some civilization we just don't know about. And that's the huge dilemma. All over this beautiful museum, there are objects that defy explanation. If you accept that the technology of the era was stone, flints, adzes, or a little bit later, perhaps copper chisels, how do you explain the perfection in many of the objects in this museum? It really does defy explanation.
JP, I see a big granite box. Tell me about it.
Well, it seems from the Egyptologists that we've spoken to that they're not actually shown or educated about this particular box, which is probably the most intriguing of all of the granite objects here in the Old Cairo Museum.
So says the official story says that this is an unfinished sarcophagus of Ourada, the king's son, and they place it at 4th dynasty King Khufu about 551 to 528 BC.
Yeah, so this is the pharaoh that the Great Pyramid is named after, purely based on a very questionable cartouche that was found in one of the chambers there by a military guy called Vai, who'd been found guilty of political fraud in the UK. So, on that note, let's actually have a look at the cutting techniques, for which there are no explanations given other than its soaring.
Look at that.
And you can see this perfect sheet cut at the rear that goes on both sides of this slab. And, there's a 90-degree angle that rubs against the main box itself.
So even though they say here that the official story is that this is from Khufu's sons too, you think it's a lot older?
I think that's what a number of Egyptologists are thinking based on what they've seen in other areas of the country, and even some of the objects here that just seem to be far better than contemporary objects in the dynastic period.
I mean, that looks like... can you see striations in the rock there? Is there any indication that there's a circular saw being used?
None. It's as smooth as you like.
So how the hell did they cut that?
That is the question.
I mean, even if it was dynastic Egypt didn't have mechanical saws.
No, and
this is solid red granite.
This is harder than steel, and you can't use copper chisels on this material. No organic matter, as we know, would be able to achieve this kind of cutting and smooth result. It's absolutely mind-blowing. And the incredible thing is, Ross, is this is probably one of the most important pieces in the museum, but it's hidden at the back against a very narrow wall where, people are going to miss this. Because the most interesting side is against this...
I mean, here we are, we're in the main foyer of the museum, and lots of people are walking past completely unaware of this box.
That's right.
And yet, what it shows is clearly some kind of advanced technology.
More than reasonable to say. Beautiful object.
A mystery. Wow. And look, the thing that really gets me is it's almost mirror smooth.
Yeah. There's no sign of any cutting tool at all.
I love the fact that you can get up close and personal with these things.
Yeah.
So, you're not much bloody use, JP. You haven't told me the answer.
I wish I had the answer.
Basically, I mean, to not sound frivolous, what we're talking about here is an ancient technology that we just don't understand.
That's right, and my speculation is it's probably acoustic or sonic cutting tools that are literally fragmenting the material into dust, and it just produces this beautiful smooth finish because there's no cutting.
But isn't it incredible that it's sitting here in the Cairo Museum, and essentially the mystery behind it is unacknowledged?
Completely, and as mentioned, Egyptologists aren't given any real explanation other than it was a sawing technique, but there's no real evidence for the fact that it was a saw.
So let's just explain to our audience, all they had, even in 2551 BC, the time of King Khufu, was, if they were lucky, copper chisels.
Something along those lines.
Or maybe stone flint.
Stones that were used to cut away, but it would have been very inefficient.
I don't think we could quite get to that level of 90-degree accuracy using stones.
I agree.
Okay, looks pretty normal from the front. Yeah, looks pretty normal from the front. Well, let's just have a look behind.
All right. And then the rest of the pharaonic depictions?
Yeah, that's pretty normal, isn't it?
The depictions are just doing...
Now, these very weird statues appear in the Cairo Museum without any explanation at all. And these elongated heads aren't explained at all. They're quite beautiful. But who made them? Nobody can explain. That's the cool thing about ancient Egypt. There's objects like this, and nobody even bothers to explain them in the biggest museum in the country. Maybe they can't. Or maybe it's an inconvenient explanation. So here we are walking through the Egyptian Museum, and what we're actually looking for are artifacts that are anomalous, that deviate from the accepted official history. And more often than not, they're tucked away in discreet corners without any explanation. And here's one of them. So the museum itself admits that these vases are from what it quaintly calls the archaic period, which is essentially pre-dynastic pharaohic Egypt, around about 10,000 plus years. And if you look at these objects, they're stone vases carved out of some of the toughest stones known on this planet. Diorite, basalt. How did a civilization that didn't have the wheel, that didn't have even copper chisels, craft something like this? A beautiful vase that is no doubt mathematically symmetrical, carved out of some kind of dark stone, be it basalt or granite or diorite, whatever it is. It's tougher than the tools they had in the day,
to be able to cut it. So I'd like to welcome Mohamed Ibrahim to Reality Check. He's an Egyptologist with incredible knowledge and experience based on many, many years' work here in Egypt, studying the ancient ruins and, more importantly, the ancient technologies that must have been used to craft the beautiful statuary and objects that we've seen on our tour here. There's a mystery, a conundrum in plain sight. And I'm hoping Mohamed Ibrahim can explain to me what lies behind that mystery. So I'm doing this with my camera on the road, a one-man band. I'm just about to switch across to Mohamed. Mohamed, welcome to Reality Check. I'm just going to put you on active track so I have your face in the right shot. Perfect. Tell me, what is the conventional view about when the pyramids, for example, were constructed?
Okay, before I answer the question, we must say that unfortunately, so many of our information and our theories about ancient Egypt came from history. And written history can be faked easily, either by the ancients or by the modern. Okay, so when it comes about the pyramids, because of history, they say that the pyramid was built in Dynasty 4 during what we call it dynastic Egypt. So we talk about around 2600 BC. And by the way, sometimes history also is not the problem. It is the lack of written history. Because in this case, when we don't find much information, then we put assumption. And unfortunately, most of the cases, the assumption is always wrong.
So let's talk about specifics. Let's look, for example, at those beautiful stone vases that we've looked at in the museums and in some of the locations that we've visited. Those are exquisite objects carved from the finest, hardest granite.
Right.
I mean, as I understand it, you need something more than a copper chisel to be able to shape something like that. What do we know about the civilization that archaeology tells us existed at that time in Egypt? And how does that compare to the level of technological sophistication that you see in those objects?
These sophisticated jars, and what I call it fancy jars, were found in the tombs of what we call them pre-dynastic Egyptians. And pre-dynastic Egyptians, all the academics, including us, the alternative speakers, we know that they were primitive people. They were survivors from an earlier disaster, and they were developing very, very basic tools and technology. And it's no way to believe that they can do such vases. But what happened, that when they started to talk about these vases, that was almost 150 years ago.
Right.
So technology 150 years ago was not the same level like we have nowadays. So in my own opinion, that was the problem. That was the thing caused this kind of wrong information. That 150 years ago, there was no computers like we do now. There is no mechanical machines.
But clearly, those vases, I've got a bee in my bonnet about them. There is no way you could make that with a copper chisel.
Of course. And as I keep saying all the time, even at that time, pre-dynastic, there was no copper chisel. So even if we...
So all they had were flint tools?
Flint tools, wooden tools, ivory tools, some kind of nails, tools.
And yet the groove marks that you've pointed us to in your wonderful lecture that showed striations that are consistent with some kind of mechanical turning.
Right.
Clearly those vases were turned like we turn objects on a lathe.
Yes. And the work of some of the engineers I know, they did measurements to the rim, to the body, to the base, and it happened that all these vases are symmetrical. The left side, the right side, the height, the top, the polishment. So, as you said, it's impossible to be done without high technology.
So this is Chris Dunn's work and the work that Ben van Kerkwijk has worked
Yes, exactly.
We've interviewed Ben for Reality Check. In fact, he was on a short while ago, and we're now following up on the ground here in Egypt. So we've interviewed Ben, and he's told us what he's seen, and we've come and seen it for ourselves. What is this then? Is this a pre-human civilization?
It can be pre-human, or as I believe, it is an early human civilization with advanced technology, advanced knowledge.
If it is a this human generation civilization, how come there's no record of it? Why have we not found any records or notes or descriptions of that human civilization that you suggest might have existed before now?
No, we do, but we don't see it in a good way. We have hundreds of evidence, but unfortunately we relate these evidence and these products and these megalithic sites to newer civilization. Like when you go to Mexico, they say the Mayan. When you go to other places, they always pick up a modern date like 3000 BC or 2000 BC.
So what age do you think, for example, the pyramids are?
Okay, if we talk about the cycles of civilizations, okay, the ancient Egyptians left the information for us. They say each cycle is around 25 to 26,000 years. The pyramid was built either in the second cycle or the third. So if we go backwards by time, so between 75,000 BC and 100,000 BC.
Oh my God.
That if we talk about one group of cycles.
So you don't think the pyramids were built 5,500 years ago, which is, I think, the conventional Egyptology explanation?
No, it's impossible. When you check the constructions of Dynasty 4, for sure we know it was built by them. The technique is completely different, the tools, the precision, and no one had this technology. You are talking about a pyramid. You know, a pyramid is a project. Our modern machines and our modern brains will stop as an, if you allow me to say, as an idiot face, not able to understand how we can achieve this project.
So I'm fascinated in the image that you showed us yesterday in the temple of what looks like a helicopter and a submarine, and even, dare I say, some kind of lenticular disc-shaped object. What are they?
I always explain that truly these are two layers of writings, okay? But my question is always why? Why these two layers? Why they picked up certain samples to be put above each other, creating these shapes? It was not random. These shapes are not coincidence of a mistake or of a kind of art.
I mean, the helicopter particularly, it's a helicopter. It's not some other, it's not a pareidolia. We're not mistaking that image for something else. It's definitely a chopper.
I agree with you. And that's why I'm saying it was deliberately made in a very good level of knowledge.
But okay, forgive me if I'm a pedantic journalist. I want to pin you down on this. If it's a chopper, how the hell did whoever rendered that on a temple in ancient Egypt, how the hell did they know what a chopper looked like?
Don't forget, we talk about high consciousness. These people developed so many skills, including brain abilities. So their consciousness and their abilities to receive and maybe to see the future was different from us. And now, this is important. We think that the helicopter, when it was made that time, for them it was future. Maybe it was a technology from the past. But we think it is future for them.
So you think it might actually be a relic, an image from a previous civilization that also built helicopters and submarines? It's just as plausible, I suppose.
I see it very possible.
Can I ask you this, Mohamed, and I don't want you to get you into trouble with your colleagues in Egypt, but do you think that this possible alternative history is being suppressed?
Yes, in a very strong way.
Why?
I think the people who put the rules of Egyptology didn't, in the beginning they didn't believe that there is a kind of high technology can do this kind of work. They were expecting the laborers doing lots of hand work, manual work, long time, primitive technique. But it happened that we found that this is not correct, okay? But unfortunately, these books, old books, and these history and PhDs and so many of these information became like holy script. And the junior students now for Egyptology are afraid to question this information.
Has it been hard for you to be a bit of a maverick, taking the contrarian view?
Yes, it was very hard because you have to speak to hundreds. And if you convince one, there are hundreds more are not following the same kind of explanation.
Do you think it's possible that the civilization that was here before this human civilization was non-human?
Maybe my own feeling, no. I feel superior human civilization existed, okay? And by the way, I think they were more than one civilization. They were, in my opinion, hundreds of civilizations.
You see a lot of the imagery in the walls, the hieroglyphs, the paintings, these beautiful images, and I know a lot of them are allegorical. They're telling a story.
Yes.
And they show reptilian heads. There's a lot of reference to reptilians. There's gigantic humans, there's giants, and there are people with very large, almost swollen heads that I have to say are not dissimilar to what we call the grey aliens. You know, is it possible that what we're talking about is a non-human intelligence that was here before us?
I learned a lesson a long time ago not to say yes easily or no easily. So it is possible, okay? But I'm telling you what I believe, and according to some understanding, that many of these figures are representing powers. The mix of the human power with the power of alligators, falcons, and other creatures. As if the human studied these creatures in a very good way, and they reached the level how to develop their abilities, their consciousness, to get close to these creatures.
Do you think we'll ever know the real story of what that civilization was in ancient pre-dynastic Egypt?
We are getting close, and we are on the right path, because I started this business 24 years ago, and I can tell you the first visitors I met at that time, they didn't pay attention to what we say now. But by time, over the years, the number of followers of so-called alternative history is increasing. And I started with like 5 people, later 500, now thousands.
It has been treated very much as a fringe subject, almost with a bit of mockery and irony, hasn't it?
Yes, but that was like 10, 15 years ago. But now, because of social media, because of all the videos is showing the truth, so it became accepted. Yes, it's still hard a little bit, but believe me, so many people now, so many officials, so many academics, they have now big questions.
Well, I hope you're right, Mohamed. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And please don't forget to click that red subscribe button to ensure you get more of NewsNation's unbiased and fact-driven news coverage.